Imagine waking up one morning to find out that over 170 million credit cards, yours, mine, everyone's, had just vanished into the digital void. No armored convoy. No army of hackers. Just one man, sitting behind a glowing screen in Miami. His name? Albert Gonzalez. The hacker who helped orchestrate what remains the largest credit card theft in history. You might picture some foreign mastermind halfway around the world. But Gonzalez was living in South Florida, operating in plain sight, while also working as an informant for the very agency hunting him. He posed as one of the good guys. Meanwhile, quietly, he and his crew were siphoning off card after card from America's biggest retail chains. It began before the hackers knew how big it would become. In the mid-2000s, Gonzalez and his associates discovered a method to exploit weak wireless networks, slip malware into corporate payment systems, and lift data in bulk from the stations you scanned your credit card at daily. When the retail giant TJX companies discovered the breach in December 2006, investigators later found that the intrusion had actually started as early as July 2005. So while your card was being swiped at checkout, someone somewhere was collecting the digital echo of that swipe. Date, time, card data, then funneling it silently into an underground network. Gonzalez operated under aliases such as Kumbajani, Supnazi, Segvec, and King Chili. What makes this story even harder to believe? While he was doing this, he had a formal role with the United States Secret Service. He was a paid informant, supposedly aiding and busting card thieves, and all the while building the biggest card fraud empire the United States had seen. He would walk into a mall store, plug in his gear, scan for insecure wireless signals, deploy custom sniffer programs, and drain networks storing millions of card numbers. He'd sell that data to other criminals. He'd encode the numbers onto blank ATM cards with magnetic stripes and withdraw tens of thousands of dollars at a time. He lived a flashy life. One court document says he once threw a birthday party costing tens of thousands of dollars, even counting out $20 bills by hand when his money counting machine broke. Authorities found more than $1.1 million in cash buried in plastic bags in a 3-foot drum in his parents' backyard. Yet, in parallel, he remained in the good graces of law enforcement. His dual identity, a government informant by day, kingpin hacker by night, allowed him to fly under the radar longer than most. By 2007 and 2008, his operations hit multiple corporations. Heartland Payment Systems, 130 million cards. Hannaford Brothers Supermarket, 4.2 million cards. Convenience stores like 7-Eleven, and 2 unnamed major retailers. The U.S. government's indictment described the theft as more than 130 million credit and debit cards. The man who once showed up at Secret Service seminars, shaking the director's hand, and presenting electronic crime methods to federal agents, was the same man plotting wholesale identity theft. That contradiction kept him safe for years. Then the investigations caught up. Coded logs, chat transcripts, VPN trails. One cut-through was a meeting in Dubai with a European card dump seller that led to the unraveling. In May 2008, he was arrested in room 1508 of the National Hotel in Miami Beach. By March 2010, he was sentenced to 20 years and 1 day in prison for his role in the thefts. He forced corporations to rethink how card data was stored. He forced law enforcement to rethink how informants were managed in cybercrime cases. Most importantly, he showed how one clever individual could reach into everyday lives and take what we assumed was safe, secure, and permanent, and make it disappear. So here's the question. When you swipe your card at a store today, remember that this story happened, and the threat remains. Because if one man could steal 170 million cards, what's stopping the next person from doing more? Today, we uncover how Albert Gonzalez, a boy once praised for his computer brilliance, used that same genius to build an underground empire of stolen data worth hundreds of millions. He lived like a millionaire, buried cash in his parents' backyard, and outsmarted the very agents who thought he was helping them. What started as teenage curiosity soon became a criminal network that reached across borders, breached major corporations, and left governments scrambling to contain the fallout. But how does a trusted informant for the Secret Service transform into the architect of the largest credit card heist in history? And how did the same man who taught law enforcement how hackers operate end up exposing the flaws of global cybersecurity itself? Stay until the end, because I'll not only show you how Gonzalez pulled it off, but I'll share 3 lessons you can use right now to protect your data. Lessons that came straight from the FBI's postmortem on his crimes. This is the story of Albert Gonzalez, the hacker who stole 170 million credit cards. Albert Gonzalez was born in 1981 and grew up in Miami, Florida. His parents, Cuban immigrants, settled in a modest working-class neighborhood south of downtown. As a young boy, Albert seemed like the kind of kid you'd classify as quietly smart. He was the one who spent more time tinkering with computers than playing outside. When he was around 12, his parents bought him his first personal computer. This machine became his portal to another world, not just games or chatting, but questions. How did viruses work? How could a program run without his permission? In school, his grades were solid. Teachers noted his aptitude. Friends whispered about how he could disappear for hours, locked in his room and typing away at the whir of fans and the glow of monitors. While other teens pursued sports or cars, he pursued code. By age 14, around the time many kids are thinking about their driver's permit, Albert was thinking about how systems could be penetrated and how networks could be manipulated. At South Miami High, he walked the halls carrying backpacks that no one really noticed. Some classmates recognized him. Most didn't. He was there, but he also wasn't. He could vanish into his own digital realm. The nickname Ghost wouldn't have been far off, had anyone given him one. What no one foresaw was how early this trajectory would tilt away from boy genius and toward digital architect of theft. Because by his late teens, the same curiosity that led him to explore viruses and code also led him into the underground world of hacking forums, stolen credentials, and illicit data markets. It didn't start as evil, at least not plainly so. It began as exploration. What happens when you push a button that wasn't meant to be pushed? As he probed networks and poked at systems, he discovered the laws of absolute control. Find the crack, widen it, slip in. For Albert, this wasn't simply breaking things. It was seeing the systems that most people ignored, the systems everyone assumed were safe. That assumption became his playground. By age 17 or so, he had already been arrested for previous hacker-related activity. A signal for those paying attention that his life had diverged far from the usual teen path. After that, instead of reeling in his risk-taking, Albert expanded. He became involved with the underground community known as Shadow Crew, a forum where stolen credit card data was bought, sold, traded. He adopted aliases Kumbajani, Supnazi, Segvek. These names masked the real person behind them, the boy who once simply wanted to understand a computer virus. During this phase, life for him had 2 parallel tracks: the everyday world, school, home, family routines, and the hidden world of telecom hops, server racks, code exploits. And very often the hidden world swallowed the everyday one. He had opportunities to break away. Many people who start on the fringe of computing make the shift into legitimate cybersecurity work. Albert even worked with law enforcement agencies as an informant. But in his case, the informant role and his own underground activity folded together in ways that would make his story far more complicated than a simple teen hacker gone bad profile. From those first machines in his bedroom to the major retail networks he would later breach, the origin story of Albert Gonzalez is a study in contrast. Brilliant mind, modest beginnings, quiet adolescence, explosive legacy, the comfort of code, the cost of crime. And when you know where he came from, the humble Miami neighborhood, the wired teenager with more questions than answers, you begin to see how the leap to mass theft, global intrusion, multi-million-dollar schemes became less of an anomaly and more the inevitable next chapter. It started small. Not with a bank robbery or a virus, but with chat rooms. In the early 2000s, the internet was still young, wild, and unregulated. Hidden in its shadows were online forums where criminals gathered to trade secrets. Stolen credit cards, fake IDs, hacked databases. These weren't the dark web marketplaces we know today. They were the early prototypes, coded in PHP, buried behind invite-only login pages. One of those digital dens was called Shadow Crew, a cybercriminal bazaar that connected hackers, identity thieves, and fraudsters from all over the world. It was where stolen data turned into real-world profit. A place where your name could be worth $20, and your entire life could be bought for $100. Albert Gonzalez didn't just join Shadow Crew. He dominated it. Under the alias Kumbajani, Albert became one of its administrators, the digital equivalent of a mob boss in cyberspace. He managed transactions, mediated disputes, and even wrote guides teaching others how to breach networks, steal data, and cover their digital footprints. To outsiders, he was just another screen name. But within the hacking world, Kumbajani was legendary, respected, feared, and untouchable. For a while, it worked. Millions of dollars flowed through Shadow Crew's operations. Stolen identities were used to buy luxury goods, launder money, and fund a lifestyle few could imagine. Albert had found his kingdom, one built not on guns or violence, but on keystrokes and encryption. But in 2004, the illusion shattered. In October 2004, after a year-long undercover operation, the U.S. Secret Service executed Operation Firewall. It was one of the largest cybercrime takedowns in history. Agents stormed homes, seized hard drives, and shut down servers. Over 20 top members of Shadow Crew were arrested across multiple countries. And among them was Albert Gonzalez. He was cornered. The genius hacker who'd outsmarted everyone, now caught by the very system he thought he could manipulate. But here's where Albert's story took a dark and unexpected turn. Instead of sending him straight to prison, the Secret Service saw potential. They realized Gonzalez wasn't just another hacker. He was a goldmine of insider knowledge. So they made a deal. Albert would become a confidential informant. His mission: help the government catch bigger cybercriminals. For most people, that would have been redemption. For Albert, it became camouflage. While the FBI believed they'd turned a hacker into a helper, Albert was playing a double game. Behind the scenes, he was already building something far more ambitious: the largest cyber heist in American history. He had learned everything from the inside: the investigation methods, the tracking tools, the blind spots in surveillance. And with that knowledge, he began to assemble his own crew, a team of skilled hackers who specialized in one thing: infiltrating payment systems at scale. At first, the targets were small mom-and-pop stores, local businesses with weak security. But soon, Albert's eyes shifted toward giants: TJX companies, Dave & Buster's, OfficeMax, Boston Market, and Heartland Payment Systems. Corporations processing millions of credit card transactions every day. And he knew exactly how to get in. Using techniques like SQL injection, packet sniffing, and network infiltration, Albert and his crew broke into corporate databases and quietly extracted customer data. They didn't just steal a few numbers. They stole entire systems. At one point, Gonzalez and his team tapped into Heartland Payment Systems, a massive payment processor handling over 100 million transactions a month. They installed malware that secretly captured every credit card swipe live, in real time. Over 2 years, they stole more than 170 million credit and debit card numbers. It wasn't just a heist. It was a digital massacre. Albert laundered the profits through offshore accounts in Latvia and Ukraine. He lived like a millionaire: designer clothes, luxury condos, high-end cars. He'd buy friends extravagant gifts, throw lavish parties, and brag about his hacking success under the guise of network consulting. But the irony was painful. The man helping the FBI catch cybercriminals was simultaneously committing bigger crimes than anyone they'd ever seen. And every time he reported to his handlers, every time he gave them information, he smiled, knowing they had no idea he was outsmarting them right under their noses. His codename in government files was Confidential Informant 103. But to the underground world, he was still Kumbajani, the digital puppet master. He was untouchable. Until he wasn't. By 2007, traces of his operations began surfacing in multiple investigations. The same digital fingerprints appeared across different breaches. Same coding style, same encryption patterns, same hacker signature. And quietly, agents began to suspect that their informant wasn't telling them everything. They didn't know it yet. But the man they trusted was the architect of the biggest data theft in history. And when they finally pieced it together, the betrayal would shock the entire cybersecurity world and change how the U.S. handled digital crime forever. Because the hacker the FBI hired was the one robbing America blind. Between 2005 and 2007, Albert Gonzalez didn't improvise. He assembled a toolkit. It was a toolbox made of code, old networking tricks, and a deep familiarity with how payment systems actually moved information. To the outside world, a credit card transaction looks like a single swipe and a green light. To Gonzalez, it looked like a river of data. Magnetic stripe numbers, expiration dates, verification codes, timestamps, flowing through point-of-sale terminals, wireless links, corporate servers, and payment processors. He learned every bend of that river and placed siphons where the current was weakest. One of his principal techniques was SQL injection. At its core, SQL injection is simple. If a website or backend system doesn't properly check the text a user enters, that text can be used to change the commands the server runs. Where a form should accept a name and return an account, a crafted input can tell the database to hand over entire tables. Gonzalez and his team wrote scripts that probed retailer websites and back-office systems looking for those poorly written database queries. When they found one, they slipped in commands that opened doors to databases full of cardholder information. But SQL injection was only one arrow in a much larger quiver. Gonzalez also relied on network sniffing and packet capture. In stores where wireless networks were used to transmit payment data, often secured with weak or outdated Wi-Fi encryption, his crew would set up compact receivers that listened to packets flying over the air. When networks used protocols or encryption that were easy to break, those packets yielded card numbers in plain text. In other situations, Gonzalez deployed malicious software on internal servers that captured data in memory at the moment it passed through, long before the stronger disk encryption ever had a chance to protect it. For certain targets, the group used malware that acted like a live tap on the pipeline. This software would sit quietly on servers or terminals, copying every swipe into encrypted files that were then exfiltrated to remote servers. They combined that with automated filters to discard expired cards, duplicates, or low-value targets. What remained were freshly usable numbers ready to be sold or encoded onto blank cards. He didn't route money directly through U.S. banks. The stolen data and the proceeds were moved through a network of offshore servers, shell companies, and prepaid cash-out operations. Cards were encoded onto magnetic stripes and cloned into plastic. Teams in the field would then withdraw cash from ATMs or purchase items to sell. The technical workflow fed into a physical pipeline. Card numbers became fake cards became cash, and cash was laundered through accounts and businesses in Eastern Europe and the Baltics. A critical component of Gonzalez's success was operational security. He compartmentalized operations. Different team members handled intrusion, data harvesting, cash out, and money laundering. He used multiple aliases, VPNs, and intermediary servers to mask the origin of attacks. He timed operations for nights and weekends, when monitoring was weaker. He exploited trust relationships, third-party vendors, outdated firewall rules, and lax patching schedules, to move laterally inside networks without setting off alarms. Every technique he used was chosen to minimize the chance of detection and to maximize the quantity and quality of data extracted. Technically, Gonzalez was sophisticated. Psychologically, he was driven by a combination of ambition, skill validation, and a desire for control. He referred to his campaign internally with a name that wasn't subtle: Operation Get Rich or Die Tryin'. That label reveals the blend of intent, financial gain mixed with a dare, an experiment to see just how much could be taken and how far he could push the boundaries before being stopped. For him, hacking was a craft. It was not merely breaking things for disruption. It was designing reliable systems for theft that could scale. He fine-tuned scripts, monitored performance, and iterated on tactics when a retailer hardened their defenses. When a security measure closed one avenue, he found another. This is part of what made his operation so effective. He treated criminal activity like product development, constantly optimizing attack vectors for throughput and stealth. There was also an element of cognitive dissonance. To law enforcement officials, Gonzalez sometimes presented himself as an ally, helping to explain the same vulnerabilities he was exploiting. That dual role, informant and offender, gave him unprecedented insight into investigative procedures. He learned where investigators would look, what forensic traces they prioritized, and which signals were likely to be missed. In effect, he used the investigator's own methods to build better cover for his crimes. But the human cost was enormous. Technically elegant attacks translated into millions of people suddenly facing fraudulent charges, canceled cards, and invasive identity checks. Financial institutions spent years repairing systems and rebuilding customer trust. Retailers were forced to overhaul how they stored and transmitted payment information. Gonzalez's technical choices, SQL injection, memory scraping malware, network sniffing, and sophisticated money laundering, combined into a single devastating effect. The ordinary financial life of millions became suddenly fragile. Exporting files, maps showing data exfiltration from store terminals to offshore servers, archival images of cloned credit cards and cash being counted, and cutaways of Gonzalez's luxury purchases to underline the real-world gains his technical work produced. In short, his methods were modern, precise, and far from random. He engineered a machine for theft, software and hardware working in concert, with people in the field converting stolen data into cash. What made it frightening was not one single trick, but the orchestration of many techniques across a global structure, held together by a mind that understood both the code and the people who guarded it. By 2006, the scale of Gonzalez's operation was impossible to ignore. Banks, credit card companies, and retailers began noticing unusual transaction patterns. Withdrawals that didn't match customer spending habits, clusters of fraudulent purchases, and sudden spikes in declined transactions. From Manhattan to London, from Miami to Chicago, financial institutions were grappling with a wave of compromised cards, millions of them. The FBI cybercrime units were deployed. Digital forensic teams analyzed logs, captured malware samples, and traced IP addresses. But Gonzalez had anticipated much of this. Most trails led to servers in Eastern Europe, Latvia, and Ukraine, locations outside immediate U.S. jurisdiction. Every time agents thought they had a lead, it dissolved into encrypted tunnels, proxy chains, and dead-end VPNs. Yet, the investigators noticed a subtle but consistent pattern. Messages encrypted with a particular signature, originating from a single Miami hotel. The signals were brief, almost imperceptible, hidden within routine network traffic. But once discovered, they became the single thread that could unravel the entire operation. The shocking truth hit the FBI like a thunderclap. The sender of those messages was someone they already knew. Their informant, Albert Gonzalez. Sound design included low, suspenseful strings, overlaid with Morse-like beeps mimicking the digital signals. The distant chatter of static radios punctuated the tension, a soundscape that mirrored the complexity and uncertainty of the investigation. At this point, the investigators faced a terrifying possibility. The very man they trusted was manipulating both sides. Everything he reported to the Secret Service, every lead he handed over, was calculated. He was running two operations at once, helping law enforcement and orchestrating a heist of unprecedented scale. Agents began to reconstruct the digital path of stolen data. By correlating malware logs, intrusion timestamps, and VPN connections, they realized Gonzalez's operations had multiple layers of obfuscation. Some malware was triggered only when specific security software was detected. Other attacks were timed for weekends and holidays. Even physical measures were used: rogue laptops in hotel rooms, removable hard drives, and dead drop points. Every lead they followed revealed more sophistication. The cloned cards, the offshore accounts, the international collaborators. Every breakthrough led to another puzzle. It became clear that Gonzalez wasn't just a skilled coder. He was a strategic thinker, understanding both the human and technological elements of crime. The FBI knew time was critical. Every day Gonzalez was active. Thousands of new cards were compromised. Millions of dollars were moving through international circuits. And the trail of victims was growing. The chase intensified. Agents began coordinating with Secret Service units, monitoring Gonzalez's known locations, and cross-referencing hotel Wi-Fi logs. Finally, a breakthrough came. Patterns of activity converged on room 1508 at the National Hotel in Miami Beach. Digital logs, encrypted messages, and observed behavior all pointed to one conclusion. Gonzalez was still actively directing the thefts from within the United States. For years, the FBI had thought Gonzalez was a partner, an informant helping to dismantle cybercrime. But now, the line between ally and criminal was blurred beyond recognition. Every keystroke he made was a message, Every command sent across the network was part of a larger scheme. And as the investigators closed in, they began to understand the full magnitude of what they were dealing with. The largest, most audacious cyber theft in history, orchestrated by a man hiding in plain sight. Someone they had trusted, someone they had empowered. The stage was set. The trap was ready. And the final confrontation, the arrest that would shock the cybercrime world, was about to unfold. Albert Gonzalez had outsmarted the very people who believed they were guiding him. The FBI, the Secret Service, all had trusted him, all had relied on him to catch cybercriminals. And all the while, he had been leading a double life. By day, he was the informant, answering questions, providing insights, even demonstrating hacking techniques to federal agents. He sat in debriefings, offered technical advice, and appeared cooperative. To the government, he was helping fight cybercrime. But by night, he was kingpin of the largest credit card theft in history. Millions of numbers flowed through his hands, filtered into offshore servers, and cataloged with the precision of a corporate ledger. The data wasn't just random collections of numbers. When investigators finally decrypted fragments of his logs, the scale and organization were terrifying. Every card was accounted for, labeled meticulously, already sold, still active, VIP target. It was a masterclass in criminal efficiency. He had built a financial atlas of stolen identities, tracking what had been monetized, what was ready for sale, and which targets would yield the highest payoff. Entire networks of stolen credit cards were categorized and mapped, not in a chaotic hacker's frenzy, but with the precision of a strategist running a global enterprise. What made the revelation worse was how close he had been to being untouchable. He had leveraged the knowledge he gained from law enforcement to stay ahead, rerouting servers, encrypting communications, and covering his digital tracks. The tools meant to protect the public and catch criminals were, in his hands, weapons for profit. And then came the moment investigators realized something else. The informant logs he had been submitting weren't just selective, they were designed to mislead. He fed the FBI small, controlled breaches to maintain trust while simultaneously executing much larger thefts. It was a level of manipulation that no one had seen before in the cybercrime world. The scale of betrayal hit every investigator like a cold wave. The man they had trusted to catch hackers had, in fact, become the very threat they were hunting. Only bigger, faster, and smarter. This was the twist of twists. The hero turned villain, the insider turned architect of the largest, most audacious cyber theft in American history. And while the investigation had uncovered a portion of his empire, the true magnitude, the millions of stolen numbers, the offshore servers, the network of co-conspirators, remained hidden, buried under layers of encryption and misdirection. For the FBI, the question now wasn't just how to catch him. It was how to untangle the web of theft he had spun, before more damage could be done. In early 2008, after years of investigation, surveillance, and painstaking digital forensics, the FBI and Secret Service finally moved in. Their target: a Miami condo where Albert Gonzalez had orchestrated countless heists. The operation was precise, surgical. Months of mapping his routines, cross-referencing network logs, and coordinating agents across multiple agencies had led them to this moment. When agents entered the condo, what they found was almost cinematic in scale. Laptops littered with encrypted files hummed softly on desks. Stacks of $100 bills, totaling $1.6 million in cash, were tucked in drawers, boxes, and safes. Luxury cars, the tangible symbols of his digital empire, gleamed in the garage. But Albert himself was calm, almost serene, sitting behind one of the computers as if he were merely waiting for a meeting rather than a raid. Some witnesses described the sight as chilling. A man who had wielded the power of the digital world laid bare, yet seemingly proud of his achievements. He was immediately taken into custody, processed, and charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, and identity theft. But the true scale of his crimes wouldn't fully emerge until investigators cataloged the evidence. Over 170 million stolen credit and debit card numbers, the largest known data breach in history at that time. In court, Gonzalez's demeanor remained calm. He entered a guilty plea, acknowledging that he had masterminded a crime that spanned years, corporations, and continents. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison, ensuring that the man who had operated with near impunity behind a keyboard would finally be removed from society. In a rare moment of reflection, Albert admitted he was addicted to hacking. That addiction, a compulsion for control, curiosity, and challenge, had cost millions of innocent people their financial security, corporations hundreds of millions of dollars in damages and mitigation costs, and ultimately, his own freedom. Even as the gavel came down, the digital trail he left behind would continue to be studied by cybersecurity experts, law enforcement, and corporations. His methods became case studies in both technical prowess and ethical failure, illustrating how brilliance without accountability can wreak unimaginable havoc. Albert Gonzalez had been caught, but the legacy of his crimes, the lessons in cybersecurity, the vulnerabilities exposed, and the millions affected, would resonate far beyond the walls of a Miami courtroom. Albert Gonzalez's arrest didn't just make headlines. It sent shockwaves through the entire cybersecurity world. His case became a turning point, exposing how fragile even the largest, most sophisticated systems could be when faced with a clever, determined insider. Corporations had to rethink everything. Payment networks that were once considered secure were completely rebuilt. Retailers installed end-to-end encryption for card transactions. Point-of-sale systems were redesigned, and wireless networks were hardened to prevent the kind of packet-sniffing Gonzalez had exploited. Companies began implementing strict internal security protocols, including employee monitoring, intrusion detection systems, and network segmentation. No longer could they rely on outdated defenses or assume that internal access was automatically safe. Governments, too, were forced to act. In the aftermath, cybercrime laws were rewritten and expanded, making penalties for data breaches, identity theft, and computer intrusion harsher. Regulatory compliance requirements, such as PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, were strengthened. Agencies realized that criminals like Gonzalez could exploit not only technology but the trust and goodwill of the system itself. But perhaps the most important lesson was psychological and strategic. Gonzalez's crimes proved that the greatest vulnerabilities often come from within. A brilliant mind with access, knowledge, and motive could circumvent the very safeguards designed to protect society. Insider threats became a major focus for organizations worldwide. Cybersecurity training, employee vetting, and monitoring became central pillars of defense, not just network firewalls or antivirus software. For individuals, the lesson was equally stark. Millions of everyday users learned that identity and financial information could be stolen in ways they never imagined. Credit cards, debit cards, and personal data were no longer safe simply because they were physical or assumed protected. Awareness campaigns, two-factor authentication, and vigilant monitoring of accounts became essential. Even years later, cybersecurity professionals study Gonzalez's methods to understand both technical exploits and the mindset of insider threats. His story is now a standard case study in training programs, a cautionary tale of how a single individual, armed with skill, access, and ambition, can compromise global systems. In the end, Albert Gonzalez didn't just steal millions of credit cards. He changed the way the world thinks about digital security, trust, and the human factor in cybercrime. Organizations, governments, and individuals alike were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Security is only as strong as the people and processes behind it. Albert Gonzalez's story is more than a tale of extraordinary crime. It's a wake-up call. If someone with his skill could steal 170 million credit cards, imagine how much risk there is in everyday digital life. The good news is that prevention is possible, and it starts with awareness and simple, actionable habits. First, never store your credit or debit card details on websites. Many online retailers offer the convenience of "save my card for next time," but convenience comes at a cost. Hackers target these digital wallets because a single breach can expose hundreds or thousands of accounts at once. Even websites you trust are not immune to attacks. If a company is compromised, stored card data can be easily siphoned off, just like Gonzalez did with massive corporate databases. Second, use virtual cards, one-time card numbers, or robust two-factor authentication for every online purchase. Virtual cards generate a temporary number tied to your real account, so even if a hacker intercepts it, it becomes useless after one use. Two-factor authentication adds another layer of security, requiring a code from your phone or authentication app in addition to your password. These steps make it exponentially harder for criminals to exploit your accounts. Third, monitor your accounts regularly. Weekly checks of your bank and credit card statements can make all the difference. Even a single unusual charge can be an early warning sign that your information has been compromised. The earlier you spot suspicious activity, the faster you can act. Cancel cards, alert your bank, and prevent further damage. And one last, crucial point. Cybercrime often starts with one click and ends with one mistake. A phishing email, a compromised website, or a weak password can all be gateways for hackers to access your data. Every precaution counts. Strong, unique passwords, careful scrutiny of emails, avoiding suspicious links, and keeping devices updated are all essential steps in building a secure digital life. By practicing these habits consistently, you're not just protecting your money. You're making it exponentially harder for anyone to replicate what Gonzalez did. He exploited a combination of skill, opportunity, and negligence. You can't stop every hacker, but you can stop the mistakes that make you an easy target. Remember, the same internet that allowed Gonzalez to steal millions can be your tool for safety. If you stay alert, stay informed, and take control of your digital life. Albert Gonzalez thought he was unstoppable. Every server, every credit card, every encryption layer. He had anticipated it all. For years, he played a game where he was always one step ahead. But as we saw, even the cleverest mind has a weakness. Arrogance, oversight, and underestimating those chasing you. In the end, the digital empire he built came crashing down, leaving behind a trail of chaos, lessons, and millions of victims. But here's the real question. While Gonzalez was caught and sentenced, the internet still hides stories that are far stranger, far darker, and far more elusive. What about the hackers who operate in the shadows, leaving only traces and whispers? Some of them have never been caught. Some of them may still be active today, exploiting weaknesses we don't even know exist. And here's where you come in. Should we dive into the story of a hacker who remains anonymous, whose exploits have puzzled governments, corporations, and cyber experts alike? Imagine a criminal so skilled that even top cybersecurity teams cannot pin them down, and whose work could affect millions of people around the world. If you want to uncover the untold stories lurking in the deepest corners of the internet, let me know in the comments. Your feedback shapes what comes next, and the next story could be even more shocking than Gonzalez's empire. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story of true cybercrime, digital heists, and internet mysteries. Every story we uncover shows how the online world can be dangerous, and how vigilance, curiosity, and knowledge are your best defense. Albert Gonzalez may be behind bars, but the internet is full of secrets, and some hackers never get caught. Are you ready to meet them? Let me know below, and we'll explore the next dark chapter together.